Lillie, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, me too. I've been on quite the carnivore diet deep dive and rabbit hole for the past many months so far, and your channel popped up in the recommended feed on YouTube, and I'm really glad that it did. Your content is so refreshing. It's so energetic. Your whole personality is so contagious. It's so fun, and it's great because you don't force your ideas down someone's throat, which I feel like often people can't do in this diet, nutrition, fitness space.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad you're enjoying the content. And, I try to make content that I would want to watch myself. So sometimes I really enjoy the more intricate, in-depth, detail, sciencey research, all of that. But oftentimes I find what I like more and what I find other people enjoy and what can be more relatable, especially to like my family, is just keeping things more simple and being like, okay, let's go to the basics.
Mm,
Processed food doesn't make as much sense. Eat whole foods. Let's focus on some protein. After that, we can have wiggle room depending on your health status.
right. So, could you briefly here to begin with, for those who may not be familiar with you, give us a brief introduction to well, who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I grew up in San Diego, California, which is the sunny part of the world. And I grew up very low
Jealous.
income. My mom was a single parent. So she was addicted to drugs and alcohol. So she had a harder time being able to keep a job. So we didn't have much money growing up. So I grew up on a lot of processed foods, macaroni and cheese, hot dogs, top ramen, just convenient, easy things. Luckily, in a way that because we didn't have a lot of money, I didn't overeat foods because we just didn't have access to having lots and lots of these processed foods. So I was always pretty lean, which was a bonus, but I also got made fun of. So while people may get fun of their weight, I was made fun of for being chicken legs, toothpick legs, flat chested. I was underdeveloped. I'm still a small human, but I ended up going to college and finally being able to have access to the all you can eat buffet. I gained the 20 pounds my freshman year, which I kind of liked because I always thought, men like girls with curves, men like girls who are thicker. And I so desperately wanted a man to love me because I just grew up where my parents really weren't a part of that love and nurturing in my life. And so once I graduated from college, I just kept eating what I was eating, was no longer working out. I had done track and field during college and really destroyed my knees. I also was eating a lot of spinach, though, and we can talk about that. But I ended up really damaging my knees where I was like, I'm not running again. I'm never working out again. I'm young. I'm able to eat whatever I want and be fine. And slowly my body composition started changing more into having more fat, but I also was having things like yeast infections, UTIs, acne, lots of mood swings, irritability, cramping, pain, joint pain, and was on that sugar crash roller coaster. Where's my next outlet to get a donut? And if I'm not eating sugar, then what's the point of life? Life's miserable if you don't get to have dessert. So I ended up meeting my now husband, and at that time, he had always been a clean eater. So when I stepped into the picture, he was eating healthy. It kind of rubbed off on me because I looked up to him, but then I also rubbed up on him, sneaking in some taco nights, some wine Wednesday, some pizza. And slowly he started seeing his health really decline. And he was like, I can't keep eating like this. I need to go back to eating more of a ketogenic diet because I know that's something that has helped heal my gut in the past. That was new news to me. What is this keto thing? And so I thought, okay, we're just not going to have bread this week. We're not going to have pasta this month. And I started just feeling better and losing weight that I didn't know I had to lose. My joint pain in my knees went away. I started having more of a regular menstrual cycle for the first time in my life. And so I started seeing all these health improvements that I didn't even know I needed. I was getting sick 3-4 times a year, like probably people maybe listening there, you get the cold during the winter, you get a flu, you get the stuffy nose, a sore throat. I got that all the time, never questioned it, just thought that was the way life was. And turns out when you put in things into your body that have lots of toxins and chemicals and ingredients that are causing this inflammation and then creating this reaction in the body, it's not normal to have all the time. So I mainly got into this healthier way of eating because of my husband, and just being around him, he really inspired me that he didn't need to have the cookie dough at night to be happy. He didn't need to be eating the cookies. And so I kind of just by being around a positive influence, it really rubbed off on me and helped me look at myself and reflect on, why do I need these things to be happy? I don't need to have these sugary processed foods for joy.
Okay, folks, I'm sorry to interrupt the podcast with Lillie Kane here, but really quickly, I just want to humbly ask you to subscribe to the podcast if you're enjoying it so far, and if you have enjoyed any other content that we've put out from this podcast. The bigger the podcast gets, the bigger the guests we can have on. So ultimately, the more value I can provide to you in the end. So it's a win-win situation is how I like to see it. So if you haven't subscribed already, please make sure to do so and enjoy the rest of this episode. Right. And so when you say your husband ate healthy and eats healthy, what kind of diet did he follow when you first met him? And that really surprised you?
So when I first met him, he was eating what would be more called like his bodybuilder diet, because he'd already done vegan, he'd already done vegetarian, he'd already done all these different kinds of diets. But his bodybuilder diet was more like just like white rice and chicken and some vegetables and like bananas, protein powder. So it was more like protein heavy, but some plant foods, but just no processed foods. I've never seen the man eat a donut. I've never seen him eat chips. I've never seen him eat a Snickers or soda. So mainly just no processed foods, but rice and chicken were a big part.
Right. And so, okay. And so he changed over to a ketogenic diet?
Yes.
And that's when you followed as well?
Right. So because I was sneaking in now pizza, like maybe you can tolerate rice, maybe you can tolerate some more plant foods. But when I was starting to put in all these other things, then it really messed him up. So he slowly started saying, I have to remove now like Brussels sprouts because I'm thinking they're causing me digestive issues. And I think the asparagus is causing me to have like not great bowel movements. So he slowly started removing more of the fiber and more of the vegetables because of his noticeable health reactions. Whereas for myself, I can still to this day eat more veggies and I can be okay. I don't need to eat them, but so I usually don't have very many vegetables in my diet just because I don't really like the taste of them. And if I have too many, I will feel it, but I would never have like a huge plate of vegetables anyway. I always have gravitated towards having more protein and more meat.
Right. This thing about vegetables being dangerous and unhealthy for you is really coming up lately in all over social media. Paul Saladino talking about this, especially being the front runner, I feel like, of this thing about toxic plants and having these defense mechanisms. What is the issue with vegetables?
I was just talking to Paul yesterday. So
cool.
with vegetables, they do have these things called anti-nutrients. These are also in not just vegetables, but in the grains and in fruit. But with the fruit, they're just in smaller amounts, and in nuts. So these anti-nutrients are basically a plant's protective mechanism, where just like how humans and all other animals have the ability to run away from predators, swim, fly, jump, get away from things that are going to eat them, plants are stuck in the ground, and all living things want to survive and reproduce. So a plant wants to be able to have its offspring, its babies, plant its seeds, just like us humans and other animals, fungus. And so plants, they're stuck in the ground, they can't move. So they've created what are called anti-nutrients, plant toxins, these defense mechanisms where if something goes to eat them, they start giving off these different chemicals, and some of these different anti-nutrients are called lectins, oxalates, phytic acid. And so it kind of can block the minerals that we eat. So if we eat too many foods high in oxalates, we might now start binding our calcium up. So even though we had some calcium, now we're having these oxalates that are binding some of those calcium up. So we're not absorbing as much calcium. So, but then also these anti-nutrients can do things like cause more leaky gut, can start causing, like, I think of it like a scratch in your gut lining, where they can start making the gut more leaky and porous, leading to things like ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, leaky gut, bloating. And so, yes, these plant toxins do exist. I think that in small amounts, people can handle some, but in these large quantities, we're having the spinach smoothie with the almond flour inside and the cacao powder inside, and we're making these huge amounts of plants that we wouldn't have had access to in these large quantities. And we're having them every single day when they would have been more in season. And not everybody has a problem with plant foods, but some people, and I think this is a conversation I had with Dr. Sean Baker, a lot more people are seeing reactions to plant foods that they probably wouldn't have in the past, because our guts are just so much more sensitive we're exposed to more EMFs, radiation, antibiotics, vaccines, smoking cigarettes. We have been exposed to so many things already that even when a baby is born into this world, chances are their parents ate some sort of processed foods or alcohol or had these different toxins, plastics, microplastics, things unrelated to food, even like, the EMFs, radiation, blue light, all these things that our guts are just way more sensitive, that some people, when they have those plant foods, they're going to have more of a reaction, eczema, psoriasis, and bad bowel movements, things like that.
The argument that plants can't run away and they obviously don't want to be eaten is very interesting to me, because it doesn't seem like it works very well, because they're still eaten by, well, animals as well, right?
Right.
There are still herbivores out there, but that's very interesting. So I remember you said that you had knee problems because of oxalates.
So I think that they're because of oxalates. So oxalates are basically like they form these tiny crystals, and they tend to go into different tissues. And if you have some sort of pain, it kind of percolates in that area. But arthritis and joint pain is a very common sign of someone having too many oxalates. So things high in oxalates would be spinach, sweet potatoes, cacao, almonds, kiwi, rhubarb. So it's more like, is having spinach once in a while that big of a deal? I don't think so. But I was having massive amounts of spinach every single day for years. And it's like, I stopped having processed food and my knees still hurt. I stopped working out and my knees still hurt. And it wasn't until I started removing the spinach, and I didn't know it at the time. Spinach is a health food, right? It's a superfood. It's the greens. The more greens, the better, the healthier you are. And that was the thing that was just causing me so much pain. And for other people, it might not show up as knee joint pain. It could show up as just even eye crust. When they wake up in the morning, they have these crystals, this crust in their eyes, or different, a lot of gut issues, brain neurological issues. So these crystals form in different parts of tissues in the body, and the biggest thing that they have been associated with is kidney stones. So I can't remember the percentage, but I think it's like 80% of people who have kidney stones, it was because they had too many oxalates.
Wow, that's crazy. It's no wonder that people are so overwhelmed with nutrition. I mean, when I started to look into all of this, I mean, I could believe, pasta, bread not being good for you. I could believe that, but I would never in a million years have believed that vegetables would be bad for you. The thing that everyone believed was essential for humans to consume.
And I do think that they do have their place. I do think vegetables have beneficial, like micronutrients. They have folate. They have some vitamin C. They do have magnesium. They do have micronutrients and things that can be helpful. Fiber, depending on the person's gut, maybe fiber could be advantageous for certain people. And they add hydration. So I think like that's a big key to plant foods. They do have a lot of water, and they can help with hydration and help us maintain electrolytes more. But not essential. You can get a lot of these things from meat. Yes, you can't get fiber from meat, but we can talk about fiber if you want to talk about fiber and whether that's essential. But I wouldn't say that vegetables are like bad foods. They're just not, like you said, we hear about them being glorified, the amazing health beneficial foods, and yet they can cause some people issues.
Right. Yeah. So what does your diet look like now?
So I eat just a lot of meat. I eat quite a bit of dairy, actually. So I wake up, my breakfast every morning is pretty much the same thing. I'll have 2 cups of raw milk, and then my lunch, I try to do the whole Noah's Ark of animals. So I don't just do like a beef only diet. I definitely have chicken, pork, fish, salmon, sardines, oysters, shrimp, scallops, lamb, venison, elk. I try to eat as many different kinds of meats as I can. I'll do eggs sometimes. I don't do great with eggs, but I do think they're incredibly nutrient rich. So I do have some eggs. I have liver, again, it's like a multivitamin to me. And then I do have a piece of fruit each day. So that's like my form of dessert. Actually, after talking to Paul yesterday, he's like, you need to be eating more fruit. We'll see if that happens. But I find if I have too much sugar, I actually will have a little bit more dandruff. But as far as like vegetables or having other things that are outside of what I just listed, I'll have other things on occasion. So like right now we have frozen peas in our freezer. So we'll just have peas randomly, or if we go to the grocery store and we're like, let's get an onion and have that with our steak. So I'm not opposed to having vegetables. It's just, I want to make sure I'm getting in all I think of vegetables and fruits as like flavor and variety, and then meats as like your nutrition. So you get your nutrition in, but if that sounds too boring to just eat like a plain chicken thigh and you want to have something extra and that works for you and you don't have any negative reactions, then have that chicken thigh to get the nutrients and have your plant foods to have the flavor and variety to keep you continually eating healthy. Because I find some people, they go too restrictive, it's boring, it's bland, they don't like it, and they're not going to continue. So they're going to go and eat processed foods.
Right,
I don't want you to eat processed foods. I want you to eat fruits and veggies.
Right. And so you are in a ketogenic state, pretty much?
I'm not convinced I am, because I do have quite a bit of protein. And then I also do have about 75 grams of carbs a day from most of that being milk. And then I do have a cup of yogurt. So milk and yogurt, and then that piece of fruit. I'm probably at about 75 grams of carbs.
Right. Okay. And so you have done keto before?
Yes.
And what difference do you feel from the diet you eat now versus the ketogenic diet?
Well, that's a great question, because I do think that my brain worked a little bit better when I was in more ketosis. So in my ketogenic version was more vegetables, actually, still meat heavy, but I didn't have the fruit. And instead I was having like cauliflower rice and just lots of cauliflower.
Right.
And a lot more fat and less protein. So I do feel like my brain worked better. However, for me, I couldn't maintain enough muscle mass. So I like to work out. I need to have a little bit more energy in the gym, and having a little bit of carbs stimulates my appetite to help me eat enough, because I don't want to have my metabolism slow down. I do want to make sure I'm getting in all the food that I need to eat. So even though you can eat one chicken thigh and feel full and not want to eat the rest of the day, if you do that, you're probably going to end up with some deficiencies, because you're still not getting in all of the micronutrients and all the food that you may need to fuel you. So I wanted to maintain muscle. So I find I need a little bit of carb to help push me in the gym, to help me eat enough, and to help with my metabolism.
Right. Okay. So did you do intermittent fasting while you did ketogenic?
Yes, I did.
Right. And that was probably a huge part of why you didn't get enough food?
Yes, exactly. So that was another reason too, is when you condense that eating window, certain people can eat enough in a condensed window. I can't. I get too full. And so I do find it's better and easier my digestion if I split up my meals, and I'm able to eat more. But like you're saying, I could have a different kind of breakfast. I could just have eggs and bacon instead of milk. But honestly, just like convenience wise, it's easier, just like quick and easy breakfast. I'm kind of on a roll in the morning. So it's just fast and simple for me to do it that way. And I'm not super concerned about the carbohydrates in the milk.
Right. So I did do keto as well at one point, and I could not get enough calories in, and I lost way too much weight. It was so hard to eat enough food. I did it for a month, and I remember I actually did feel really hungry. Not in my eating window, but in my fasting period. I never got to that point where supposedly you're supposed to feel satiated and your hunger is supposed to go away at some point. I never hit that. So I was feeling really hungry in my fasting window. And obviously because I didn't get enough calories and didn't get enough food, I'm really physically active as well, so burning a lot of calories in the gym as well. And I just remember the mental clarity in my eating window was great, but my fasting period was miserable.
I experienced that in the beginning, but my body did end up adapting, and I did get used to not being as hungry. But see, for anybody listening who they're like, I'm trying to lose weight. Well, then, okay, great. We just said, hey, we ended up eating less. And that's a big thing when it comes to weight loss. Like, you need to eat less, but you also don't want to feel hungry all the time.
Right.
So you could eat a processed food diet. You can eat a standard American diet and having, you can lose weight eating donuts, but you just have to be in a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
Or you can do a ketogenic diet and you can, in my case, feel full when I eat, but I'm also eating less so then I can lose weight. So I lost, like you, I lost a bunch of weight. I was only 100 pounds. People were asking me, are you okay? Are you anorexic? Are you having an eating disorder? Because I just lost so much weight so quickly, because our body, when we have carbohydrates, carbs hydrate the cells, we hold on to more water.
Right.
So we might have not lost fat, but we lost a lot of water. And so the scale number changed and our body composition changed, and we look so much more lean and less puffy.
Yeah.
So, if anybody's trying to lose weight, then that's an easier way to lose weight is work more protein, be more ketogenic. And then if your goal is not to lose weight, well, you may need to not do intermittent fasting, maybe have a little bit of carb to stimulate your appetite.
Right.
What do you do for meals?
Right now? So I eat probably 75% animal based, and I do have tortillas right now, even though I know they're a no no. But they're so convenient because I love to
Yeah.
meal prep. So I have the
Mhm.
tortilla, put some meat in there. I do some mushrooms as well, and some onions, and then you just roll them up, and then in the freezer, and then you have your meal. Right when you get home from
Awesome.
work, you just thaw them out in the microwave, and then you have your meal. So I do eat tortillas pretty much every single day, but for the most part, I have eggs, bacon in the morning for breakfast, and then I have beef with cheese and honey for lunch, and then the tortillas at for dinner. So I
Nice.
would say, yeah,
So
75%. It's a little higher on carbs than I would like, but I'm thinking about cutting out the tortillas. Obviously, I know they're not great for you.
I guess it just depends on what's inside the ingredients because I'm not opposed to grains, but the grains that I would suggest are very hard to find. So, like, I think a homemade fermented sourdough bread can be fine for certain people, but in the grocery stores, at least in the US, you're not going to find that.
Right.
Like it'll say sourdough, but what the bread really is bread made sour with citric acid or apple cider vinegar or some sort of vinegar or other additive to make it sour. It didn't truly go through the fermentation process.
Right.
So it's still so it can be really hard for the digestive tract. And so I think homemade fermented sourdough bread, soaked and sprouted oats, and organic white jasmine rice can be tolerable grains for people.
Hmm.
Again, not necessary, but I mean, I'm not going to demonize food. So I think like if people need grains, like those are the ones I would push them towards.
Right. There's also another issue with bread in the US. Almost all bread you come across has so much sugar in it. It's so
Mm-hmm.
crazy. It's so
Mm-hmm.
backwards from here in Denmark where I'm from.
Right.
We don't see that here. It's like cakes in America.
Right. See, that's why I'm saying your tortillas might not be as bad as our
Yeah.
tortillas here.
Right. Yeah, that is an issue in America. They put sugar in everything over there.
Yep. Keep them eating. Because if you have that sweet taste, stimulate dopamine hit.
Right.
Like same thing, similar to shopping. Like I think sometimes we think, oh, food can be addictive. Food can have, light up our brain and give us that pleasure and that happy, feel good feeling. But same thing with like shopping. So
Mhm.
that's like also in America, people are a lot in debt. So they're going and they're like, oh, I need to have that trinket. I need to have that thing. And like, you don't need to have that, but it
Right.
makes you feel good when you get to swipe the credit card and buy something. And it lights up your brain in the same way that eating a Snickers bar does. But yeah, that's what they're doing with the grocery stores here in the US is every time we can light up your brain, you're going to want to go back to the grocery store and give us more money. And now we benefit. Oh, and guess what? Now we're going to give you some medications.
Yeah.
And so we're going to get more money. So it's like a whole I wish that the interest wasn't money driven.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're like intentionally trying to make people sick, but they are intentionally trying to make money, and that is the way that they do that.
Yeah. I wish I could be optimistic about it, but I definitely think that they are trying to make people sick because there's so much money in all the medicine. Have you spoken to Dr. Robert Lefkin?
Mm-mm.
He's really interesting. He wrote this book called, oh God, what was it called? I just spoke to him a few months ago. Lies I taught in medical school. So he was teaching all of these lies that meat was bad, and the traditional diet that they try to teach us to eat was good. And then he converted, I suppose. And now he wrote a book about some of these things that he taught in medical school that essentially were lies, and he was doing studies and research funded by all of these corporations that sell all this medicine, and from Kellogg's and all these processed food companies. And it's really interesting. I think the health system is super corrupt, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I do think there's a huge interest in making us sick so they can profit off of us, because there's way more money in having a sick population. They don't want us to die necessarily. They want us to stay sick, but not sick enough so that we die, but so sick that they can keep selling us medicine. Yeah, and I think unfortunately that is how the world is right now.
So if we're really trying to get conspiracy theory here, well, I think that yes, keeping people sick, but also limiting people's control, because they can if they can control your mind, because now people are a little bit, more brain dead. They're like, oh, I don't know what I need. I don't know what I want. I mean, like when I remember when I was eating more processed foods at the time, I didn't realize it. I was like, no, I'm using my brain. But I think like one of the biggest benefits I've experienced from not having processed foods in my diet is I literally get to have the power to choose if I want to have those foods. Whereas before I didn't have that power. I don't have that control. That those companies, those advertisements, those controlled me, because they know how to create the sounds, the crunch, that sensation, the colors that light up your brain. They know how to do all of the marketing. They've been doing research to figure this out. To what can I get people to be more and more addicted? And then in doing so, now our brains are taken away. And now we're living in a society where it's, especially in the US, where we live in a society of people just being so sick and so obese and have diabetes, and they can't think as clearly. And so if you can control the mind, now that you can control everything about people and their actions and COVID and all the things that go on.
Right. No, I totally agree. And I mean, sugar is super addictive. It's proven to be a substance that, it enters your bloodstream quickly. It triggers this, as you said, the dopamine response in the brain. It makes you want more and more of it. Yeah, that's so crazy. Could we, okay, let's circle back for a moment. I know it's a little bit late in the episode, but there are some people out there who might not know what the keto diet is, what intermittent fasting is. Could you explain what these terms mean?
So intermittent fasting means you're condensing your eating window. So some people, there's debate on it, if that means you have to be just like 15 hours of non-eating, or if that means you have to be 24 hours of non-eating. I'm just going to go with like what I used to do, which was like a 16-8. So you would not eat for 16 hours, and then for 8 hours of the day, you would eat it during that eating window. Now, I think with intermittent fasting, some of the benefits are that you may have more mental clarity, because if your body is constantly digesting food, every time we eat, our blood from our brain has to go into our digestive tract to help us with digestion. And so people, you eat, you're like, oh, I feel like a little bit tired. So I think one of the benefits to intermittent fasting is having more brain clarity and cognition and mental clarity in overall when you're not eating. However, again, I think that a lot of times people also would associate intermittent fasting with being a great weight loss tool. And it can be, but the reason why intermittent fasting is so great for weight loss is because naturally, when you constrict your eating window, you tend to naturally undereat. So then people lose weight and they're like, oh, it was intermittent fasting, when it was really like calorie restriction. So you don't have to do intermittent fasting to lose weight. But if for some people, they would rather not have to think about, okay, today I'm going to eat all day long, I'm just going to eat a little bit less all day long. Instead, they would rather just say, I'm only going to eat during this condensed eating window, and naturally I will therefore eat less. And then with a ketogenic diet, technically a ketogenic diet is a low, well, it's a pretty low to no carb diet with moderate protein. I guess they didn't like that one. I don't know, but it's moderate protein and high fat. So I think sometimes that gets confused with people can become more confused because they think of like a carnivore diet as being a keto diet, and it can be a ketogenic diet. But if someone's eating just chicken breast has no carbs, but it's super high protein and very low fat. You might not be in a ketogenic state because your protein can also spike your insulin. So then you're not in that same ketogenic state. Now, I'm pretty sure most people who are eating like a carnivore diet, they would be in a ketogenic state. But usually a true ketogenic state is you are doing high fat, moderate protein.
Right. But so, okay, you said something interesting about intermittent fasting, that yes, surely most people will eat in a caloric deficit to lose weight in this sense. But typically when you're doing intermittent fasting, you also lower your insulin, right? Because you don't eat as many meals as frequently, which does help weight loss, right?
Yes. However, if someone in their condensed eating window is only eating processed foods, let's say they're eating lots of donuts and chips and candy in that condensed eating window, they're going to have a huge insulin spike.
Sure.
Versus if they were to eat 6 times a day spread throughout and they only ate steak, sure, their insulin's going to spike 6 times, but it's going to spike 6 times a lot less. You're going to improve your insulin a lot more than doing like a condensed eating window of a lot of carbs and sugar. Right. So I think it just depends. For most people, they're eating a standard American diet. So if they were to then constrict their eating window and continue to eat a standard American diet, that would improve their insulin sensitivity. that would help with their weight loss. But if they don't want to intermittent fast, then instead they could just take their standard American diet and just eat more low carb. And that can also improve their insulin sensitivity.
Right. But when in your eating window, if you eat, let's say, 2,000 calories of processed food versus eating 2,000 calories of a ketogenic diet, you would still lose more weight from the ketogenic diet because your insulin is lower, correct? Even though you eat the same amount of calories.
Yes, exactly.
Because
so that's whether you're intermittent fasted or not, though, right? Because you can be intermittent fasted eating junk, or you can be ketogenic and not intermittent fasted, and you're going to see better insulin sensitivity.
Okay. Makes sense. I wanted to talk a little bit about your content as well, because I love it so much. When did you get started on social media?
So at the end of during 2020, we were living in Hawaii, and in Hawaii, it runs a lot on tourism. So the whole island shut down for 9 months. Nobody was allowed into the island. I was a realtor at that time. And so I was having clients call me saying they were losing their jobs. They weren't able to continue to buy a home. And so a lot of people lost their jobs in Hawaii. And we decided that it was time to go back to the mainland in the US to get closer to our family. And eventually, when we have a child, then we have better school systems and hospitals and things like that here. So we moved to Pennsylvania temporarily moved in with my mother-in-law, and I have a hard time sitting still. So I was like, okay, I need to do something. We don't know what we want to do next with our life. So we were kind of taking a pause break, and I ended up finding Mr. Beast. And Mr. Beast is giving away houses and cars and giving away money. And I could just see how much he was changing people's lives, that I was like, cool, I'm going to do that. I'm going to post a YouTube video, get 1 million subscribers, and I'm going to give all this money away to people. It doesn't work like that. So I ended up starting by making DIY crafts, where I was making wreaths and candles and different crafts and saying, hey, if you subscribe, I'll give you my craft. And I did that initially for a few months, but I ended up, it wasn't really picking up. So I started saying, okay, well, let me try doing what to get someone for Valentine's Day, what's trending in the new year, what I eat in a day. And then that what I eat in a day popped off, got 600,000 views. And I got so many questions. People were asking, well, why don't you drink coffee? Why don't you have seasonings? Why don't you have more vegetables? And so I started realizing that I could be a outlet and a voice for health and nutrition, especially because I did. So it's funny because I never at the time started the channel to help with health and nutrition. I started my channel to help with bringing joy, light, and smiles. Like, I'm all about smiling. And I think smiling is a great form of medicine.
Yeah.
And so you can be eating the cleanest, healthiest diet, but if you're miserable and frustrated and an angry person, you might still not live as long as somebody who's eating more of a processed food diet, but they're completely filled with joy.
Right.
So I started my channel just to be light and be joy. And then I realized that I could also do that by helping people with their health, because it's really hard to be truly happy if you're not healthy. And so it's really nice that I just ended up kind of landing myself into this after seeing people asking more questions. Hey, how can I get healthy? How come you have so much energy? How come you are so bubbly? And then getting to just help people through those questions.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah. Not only does your content give a lot of value, but it's also really well put together. Have you studied any filmmaking courses, social media courses at all?
I have not. I would say a lot of it has been trial and error. I would also say that I look at my older content, and so it's pretty much 2021 is when I started, essentially in the beginning of the year. And I look back on those videos and I'm like, oh my gosh, so cringy. What was I doing back then? But so it's kind of just keep putting out content and seeing what works. And then looking back on your content, because I'm doing that currently, where I'm going through old videos and being like, okay, let's private those ones. But you get to learn a lot too by looking at those and then seeing, okay, why are people watching these ones? Why aren't people watching these? And so, I was asked that recently too. Somebody said, how did you figure out to dance in the grocery store with Oreos and chips? And I was like, I'm weird. I just off camera, I am dancing. Off camera, I have danced in the airport with my husband. I just try to embarrass him. I just have always had a lot of bubbliness, I guess. And so I just am myself. And I think that if you're yourself as well, then people can see that.
Yeah. People really love authenticity.
Mhm.
So
Sometimes you have to be a little bit over the top, I guess, with social media, because you want people to, you're spending the time to create the content because you want people to get value and you want to help people.
Right.
But if they don't watch it because it was boring or it didn't grab their attention or it didn't have the clicky title, then that's lame, because now you wasted your time, but you also didn't help people.
Yeah.
So I've heard and I've learned that like the first sentence you say is so important. And I used to start my YouTube videos being like, "Hey, welcome back. It's Lillie." And it's like, sorry, they just want you to jump into it. Start telling them what the information immediately. And then same thing with like the short form content is like, what's the value right there in the beginning? The first sentence is so important.
Right. So interesting. So when you do all these the dances in public, people are probably staring, thinking, "What's this girl doing?" This was a hurdle that I had to overcome when I did TikTok a lot. I forced myself to do a lot of those weird things in public as well for the camera. So this was something you were just naturally gifted with, not caring about what people think, or?
Well, the more and more you do it, the less and less you care, because I initially always was like, okay, no one's watching, let's film it right now.
Yeah.
So I would do it when nobody was watching. And then now it's like, there's too many people in the grocery store. I don't got time for this. Like, we're just filming it. If you see it, watch it. But I do still try to be respectful and like not, make a show when people are grocery shopping and be like, oh, so yeah, I've gotten different managers come up to me and go, "Hey, what are you doing in here? Are you disrespecting our food?" I'm like, "Oh no." So I do try to pay attention to who's around, but yeah, otherwise you kind of just have to say, okay, we're doing it. And I know that other people, they're never going to see me again. Or if they do see me again, well, then they'll think, hey, she likes to dance.
Yeah. That's something I dealt with a lot, the nerves of being embarrassed in public. And I think that's something a lot of people who want to start making YouTube videos deal with, especially if they have to make content in public. And essentially you look weird and you make a fool out of yourself sometimes in public. But weren't you nervous at all in the beginning?
Yes, but in the beginning, I was making sure people weren't around. So I'd go at like 6 a.m. at the grocery store. I'd go at 10 o'clock at night, like at those extreme times where no one was there.
Okay.
And then slowly, I become more nervous doing these conversations than I do with filming out in public.
Oh, really?
I think so, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I just have no nerves around the whole thing now, especially because I have my husband to film. So like when I was doing it by myself and I have to like prop the cell phone up in the aisle of the grocery store and like stand away, then it was like harder. But when I have somebody else there, then it makes it more efficient.
Yeah. Is your husband the same way?
Oh, absolutely not. No, we are the yin to the yang. So it's like we help balance each other out. I'm like over the top, goofy, silly, and he's like super mature. So he's like, all right, we're gonna bring some maturity in, and I also will bring more of like the light to him too, where it helps him calm down. That
makes the perfect couple. But, yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Lillie, thank you so much.
He does a lot of the editing. So he does all the short form videos.
So he's involved in the whole process?
Oh yeah. He does 50% of the work.
That's awesome.
He doesn't like to be on the screen as much, but he does I think single-handedly helped grow the channel with his just input on like, hey, let's be more mature, because most of your audience is people who are older, because most young people don't care about their health as much.
Right.
And so if you're going to talk to an older person, you have to like still talk to an older person. Sure, you can have your little jokes, but like be a little bit more mature.
Right.
And then also his editing. Initially, like he had no idea about anything with editing, and I had to show him, okay, this is how you chop, this is how you crop. And then now, like lo and behold, it's like I gave this man like this little thing, and he roller coastered it into like this amazing edits that I can't even keep up with. Where I'm like, how did you do that? So yeah, it's really fun.
So you said you started this whole thing because you saw Mr. Beast. Is the goal to become the Mr. Beast of health and carnivore?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I know that I'm associated with the Carnivore group, and that's awesome because I think it's a really useful way that people can eat to become healthy. But I don't think the majority of people are going to ever do that. And like I'm currently helping my family with weight loss, and my family would never do that hardcore of a carnivore diet. So I'm trying to move more towards like your average Joe, the average person who's going to go out to eat, who's going to be celebrating things, and who wants to have more flavor and variety. So I'm trying to move more towards like helping the average person.
Right. Makes sense. Awesome. Lillie, thank you so much for the chat.
Awesome. Thank you.
Where can people find your work?
I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Lillie Kane.
Awesome. Great. This was so much fun.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the podcast with Lillie Kane. I appreciate you stopping by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already, because the more subscribers we get, and ultimately the bigger the podcast becomes, the bigger the guests we can have on. And ultimately, the bigger the guests we can have on, the more value I can provide to you, the listeners and the viewers, and however you choose to interact with this podcast. And so I like to view it as a win-win situation. You know, if you subscribe, you get more value out of the podcast. So thank you so much. And until next time, take it easy. Peace.